to you and welcome to our Thursday show. We had a bit of a break last week. I'm glad to say we're back with live guests. Well, very much a live guest, despite what some people might think this week. Guys who, you know, have been in the business in one case for, and I'm talking about my business, our business, for decades, and I go back decades with him. And another guy who dates in this rather memory lane show, which focuses a lot on Bramall Lane. His role would be inconceivable now. I mean, firstly, you wouldn't have a Premier League football ground that also was the home of first-class cricket. That's one thing. And also, you'd never conceive of having an all-year-round groundsman who tended a football pitch and a cricket pitch. But that's precisely what David Robbins, good evening, David, did back in the day at Bramall Lane. And we're going to look in a minute at just the area of space that you had to tend. It's great to see you. And Stuart Linnell, my old friend, my old boss, my first boss on radio at Radio Hallam.
Hallam.
They don't call it that anymore, do they?
I don't know what they call it now. It became Hallam FM, didn't it?
It did.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's even there
But
anymore.
the radio landscape has changed so much, and stations at this moment changing names and programmes going national, all sorts of odd things happening. So not the radio that we used to know, Bigsy.
No, unfortunately not. I mean, we used to have a ding-dong with Radio Sheffield, and there was fierce competition, great healthy rivalry in your days as sports editor, and then when I managed to succeed you. But that's gone now, because it's a total monopoly, and Radio Sheffield do a good job.
Well, if you remember, if I remember rightly, their medium wave frequency in the days before FM became the big thing was 260. Ours was 194, so we had the slogan, get the score on 194, forget the foe on 260.
Very good. Well, let's just see if you'll recognise this fella. Let's just take you back and have a look at... do you recognise him, Stuart? Any idea who that is?
Now.
I tell you what, I haven't got that shirt anymore, I promise you that.
You probably wouldn't fit into that shirt.
But that's very true.
Yeah, well, this is Stuart at Radio Hallam microphone in, what, circa 1974?
1974, thereabouts.
When the station started. Yeah, he's got a rather better taste these days. But he's still working. You're still. I know you retired from a full-time
Semi-retired, yes. I'm no longer doing radio or TV on a full-time basis. But I'd keep my hand in.
Yeah.
I spent 10 years working for BBC Radio Northampton, including the time when Chris Wilder was manager of Northampton Town, and enjoyed that thoroughly. Lovely people, lovely place, even though Northamptonshires had a bad time, as people know if they follow the news. The county council's bankrupt and all of that. So it's been a difficult time for a lot of people there, but a lovely place, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. And I've been living in Coventry, and I still work for BBC Coventry and Warwickshire. Before that, for a commercial station that was then called Mercia Sound. Yeah. That's no longer a name that's used anymore either. For 40 years, in fact, it's 40th anniversary of that station next May. So
well, the radio landscape has changed massively.
Yeah.
Talk about the football landscape, Sheffield United and Sheffield Wednesday, newsy times for both as the programme goes on, but also about your job, David. We've had a flashback to Stuart back in 1974. Let's have a look.
Me.
No, we haven't got one of you. We haven't got one of you, but we can see your area of responsibility, which was fairly huge. So here we are. This is Bramall Lane when it hosted Yorkshire County Cricket Club up until 1973, and football. There you are.
Yeah.
How many acres on there?
No, I know how many acres, but the area behind the Spine Cot. Now, we used to have our cricket practice wickets there down the back of down Shore Street. And Boycott used to say they were the best practice strips there was in Yorkshire.
Well,
for practice nets.
He got big use of them. One day I saw Yorkshire play West Indies in 1968 or something. Boycott was out for naught, and I was sitting just to the right there of that Bramall Lane cot cover. And within minutes of getting out, Boycott reappeared below me. I looked over the wall below me, and he practiced most of the rest of the day down there in those nets there.
Yes, he did.
And how did you? And you had responsibility for the whole lot.
Whole lot, yes, all of it.
All year.
Yes, the little area there at the corner of Cherry Street and Shoreham Street. They used to practice the football on there, little five-a-sides.
Yeah.
That's the only practice what they used to have.
And this side is the old cricket pavilion, which is, I suppose, would be on what is the car park.
It is, yeah. That's right, yeah.
Am I right in thinking that's where Yorkshire County Cricket Club was formed? Bramall Lane. They started there, didn't they?
I don't think so.
1855 was the first cricket at Bramall Lane, and there were all sorts of landmarks, weren't there? There was a test match there, there was a floodlit football match there, all sorts of things.
There was a test match there that Australia won, Alan, as well.
Yeah, I think there might be another test match that Australia win very shortly as well. How did you do it, David? And
just a job for me. It was groundsman, and obviously preparation for cricket weeks are completely different to football, but as you say, it's like two different jobs. We prepared and maintained a football ground, and we prepared and maintained a cricket ground, and it did work, yeah.
Not only was there an overlap in terms of the seasons, but you had an overlap in terms of part of the football pitch was on the cricket outfield, and vice versa, wasn't it?
The cricket square was quite close to the touchline on that far side.
Yeah.
It was only a matter of a few metres away, and you were onto the square. Yeah. But obviously you had to maintain it a little bit different when cricket was on, knowing that football was going to follow in several months' time, but it worked. Yeah, it worked.
Well, when batsmen played an off drive or an on drive, and it would go on, if they were facing John Street, it would then go onto the longer grass,
obviously it was slow, yeah.
And slow down.
Yeah.
It had to be hit.
Yeah.
So did you get complaints from either football or cricket?
No. They knew that was going to happen, didn't they? And so, no, we never had any complaints about that, about cricket, the football pitch being a little bit longer.
You told me that you've got good stories about the building of the stand, which I'll ask you about. The South Stand, that was in they built that in 1974.
That's right.
I think.
Yeah.
We'll come to that in a minute, because that's when you started at Radio Hallam. Was just following the end of cricket, and I know how big a cricket fan you are. So
indeed,
it's sad, really.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the cricket ended at Bramall Lane in '73, and then they started building the stand, as you say, which then opened in '75. We went on the air, if you remember, 1st of October 1974 at Radio Hallam, and we covered Yorkshire and Derbyshire, and of course Yorkshire then moved to Abbeydale and played their cricket in the city of Sheffield.
Oh, what a wonderful setting that was.
Absolutely beautiful.
What a pleasure it was when you dispatched me to to Abbeydale Park or Queen's Park in Chesterfield. It was
Queen's Park,
fantastic.
That is one of the loveliest grounds, isn't it, Queen's Park? It really is a beautiful ground. Well, both of them, actually.
Yeah.
Abbeydale and Queen's Park. I mean, lovely grounds. And, happy memories of both in many ways. At Abbeydale, apart from watching some great cricket, it's where I got told off by John Hampshire for calling him Jack.
Really?
I'm John, I'm not Jack. So he didn't like that at all. And
lots of people refer to him as Jackie.
Jackie, they do, absolutely.
Yes,
and he'll take it from a supporter, but I was a reporter and should have known better. Right. So I should have called him John. And we had I forget the fixture now, but Freddie Truman was there, and Michael Parkinson, who often turned up to watch cricket in Yorkshire, of course, and still does. He was there, and we recorded a programme for Hallam that we called Abbeydale Conversations, rather grandly. Yeah. But it was, Fred had just had a new book out, Ball of Fire, if I remember the title, and he and Parky and I sat down in a marquee on the edge of the ground. And no sooner had we started, because those two were there, nothing to do with me, but there's a sudden big crowd of people around us, all listening and applauding and laughing along with them, which was a great memory.
Yeah, I remember that very well. You had about an hour of solid gold conversation that I think you compartmentalised.
Yeah, and I listened back to some of it quite recently as well, to just to see what they were saying at the time.
Yeah, I remember interviewing Geoffrey Boycott a few times in those days, through an intermediary. There was a guy called Len Cox, who was a big pal of Boyk's, and what I couldn't do, he could, and he used to just bring him to me, bring the great man to me.
My first meeting with Geoffrey Boycott was just before Hallam went on the air. He was going into his testimonial year in 1974-75, testimonial season. And we had a guy, if you remember Brian Kirkham.
I do, yes.
From Ladbrokes, who was our racing man, and he had a big contact with Geoff Boycott. And he said, would you like an interview with him, because he's obviously looking for publicity for the events around his testimonial. I said, yeah, okay, well, can you fix it up? He said, yeah. And so anyway, he phoned me 2 days later. He said, can you go to Fitzwilliam?
Right.
And he gave me the address. And it was Geoff's mum's house.
Yeah.
And I was allowed over the hallowed portal to
Really?
interview the great man, who was sitting there in his dressing gown on the telephone to Brian Clough, arranging various things for his dinner and testimony. And it was an amazing room, his mum's front parlour, and all the way around the room there were photographs of Geoff in his pomp, Geoff scoring runs, Geoff winning trophies from a schoolboy right up to professional days, and there were cricket balls and all sorts of memorabilia around there. And he gave me a really good interview.
Yeah.
Later, some years later, I've gone out. This is towards the end of my time at Hallam, around 79, I guess, and I'd gone out to Australia for reasons I won't go into now. It was all to do with broadcasting. And because I said, if anybody's going to Australia while there's a test match on, I'm going. So we went out there. And we left Sheffield with the snow up to your thigh, and it was the milk run, as they called it, on Qantas Airlines. So it stopped everywhere on the route to Kuala Lumpur, Singapore, everywhere. Got out there, and of course it was 93 in the shade in Sydney when we got there. And Randall and Boycott had been batting to save the test match. And I made myself known when I got to the Sydney Cricket Ground. And Bob Willis, who I knew from Warwickshire days, was around playing at the time, and he said, "Don't worry, Boyks is busy at the moment, but come back at the end of play, we'll sort it out." And I went back at the end of play. He disappeared. Went back the next day, and then the final day of the Test match, and he disappeared. And I never got the interview, so I never actually saw him. But that was Geoffrey. He could be great. And
I had mixed. I had mixed experiences, including that's poppycock. Is that, Alan? That's poppycock. Is that? I forget what the question was, but I remember that response. But he's a brilliant broadcaster on cricket. I love listening to him.
Absolutely.
Learn something from him all the time.
Going back to what you said about moving to Aberdeen, quite a bit of our equipment, we maintained the ground at Bramall Lane, went to Aberdeen when Aberdeen took over the Yorkshire matches.
Yes,
because obviously we didn't need it for the football then.
So you continued operating?
Well, we didn't, but a lot of our equipment went up to Aberdeen to help maintain the ground there.
So a quick flashback to sort of the halcyon days, I suppose, of cricket at Bramall Lane. Just look at that ground there.
Fantastic.
I don't know precisely when that was taken. I'm guessing probably 1920s or something, or thereabouts. And that's the old pavilion. The manager of Sheffield United used to have his office in there. I remember interviewing Harry Haslam in there. And it's sad to see that magnificent building.
That must have been way back, because on that corner, on the left-hand corner there, the press box was built at a later date.
Right.
There was a press box on that corner.
Yes. Okay, well, if we fast forward, and you were around the building of the new South Stand, the Tony Curry Stand, as it fittingly is now called.
It is.
You said on the way up, the 3 flights of stairs, well, I've got some stories about that stand. Go on then, the floor is yours.
At the time as they were building the stand, we had the new pitch laid at the same time. And the contractors for who was building the annual football pitch wanted a lot of sand bringing in on site to construct and put these what we call sand bands and gravel bands in to help with the drainage of the pitch. But I think it was George Longdon who were building the stand at the time. They would only allow this contractor to bring all his materials in on one particular Saturday morning. And we're talking about 1,000 tons of sand. And we've got lorries parked all the way down Shoreham Street as far as St Mary's Gate, queuing to come into to get into the football ground to bring all this material. It was unbelievable. All day on that Saturday, bringing all the materials in to construct the stand, to construct the pitch.
But people don't realise it's what goes into a reconstruction on that scale. Just one other view before we continue, before we talk about football. People mostly watch this for football, you know that, don't you? It's not changed. It's not changed from your day, and we have to be very careful that we get the
balance
politically correct balance. Here's look at this picture now. This courtesy of Stevlaw, who's a presenter on Sheffield Live Radio here. And that was taken from the top of a floodlight pylon. You can see one of the lights actually in the foreground there. He reckons it was taken by him actually in 1996 or thereabouts. Now, his father was a steeplejack, and Stevlaw was there in a photographic capacity, so he climbed the pylon. And that's some view. and the pitch was being
Relayed again.
Relayed then, and that's if you've ever wondered about a floodlight view. Sadly, these pylons are going out of existence now. They used to be great geographical features of finding grounds, but there we are. Some of that's familiar, like the cop end.
And that's when they were building a new John Street stand, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. It took years to do that, and that was demolished. You can see the roof of the south stand.
And that was one of the odd things, wasn't it, when we started? You'll remember, Biggsy, I'm sure, that you had this modern new south stand, as you say, the Tony Curry stand opposite a very old wooden structure.
Ramshackle, yes. Absolutely, which had been bombed in World War II, that structure. But just looking at that floodlight pylon view there reminded me, when I saw it earlier, and thank you, Stevlo, for it, by the way, of how you dispatched me. I think it was a summer Saturday, with wasn't very much going on. And you'd fielded we had a phone call at Radio Hallam from a cigarette company that had a promotional hot air balloon in the middle of Bramall Lane, and they were about to take off from there, and they just wondered if anybody
was it 555?
Anybody on the station would like to go with them.
I thought, and you're just the man.
You did. You were about to take to the air, actually presenting the Sportacular, as it was called. So guess, it was a wonderful, unforgettable experience, but extremely frightening. But I can, I know what it looks like from floodlight pylon level, because that's where I first clocked the feeling of height and also the feeling of helplessness when I saw the tops of the pylons.
I can actually remember that, Dave. I think the balloon was 555. The cigarette company. I've got to get a photograph at home of that. Yes. And was it you who was sat in the basket?
I was sat. Yeah, I was carrying. It was me, and I did live weather reports and stuff for you on air. And people were listening and following that. We had to make an emergency landing on a cricket pitch with the game in
motion. I remember that.
Crooks Waterworks ground. And Robin Batchelor, the pilot, shouted, "Everybody off!" to these guys who were just sort of gazing, and it was balloon stop play, and then hundreds of kids flooded onto the
balloon stop.
I would have known you were going to mention that. I would have brought the photograph with me.
Yeah. You've got a photograph?
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
Oh, I'd love to see that. Anyway, Owls and Blades, better times really now than probably any that you had in situ.
We saw them both down to the third division at the same time.
Yeah.
And creating records with the attendances at the derby matches in the third division.
Yes.
Extraordinary. Yes. But then, I say extraordinary, not really surprising if you're from Sheffield and you understand being a United-ite or a Wednesday-ite.
Yeah. Yes. But you had those polar extremes, as you say, of this colossal interest, 49,000 at Hillsborough on Boxing Day, and then 45,000, I think it was, at Bramall Lane. And those two games must imprint themselves on
Terry Curran's goals, do you remember?
I do. Well, I was with him last night. He never stopped talking about it. I was with him, honestly. I was with him. I was interviewing Ron Atkinson, an evening with Ron Atkinson last night, and Terry came along. And so I've heard more than enough about that for now. Any particular football memories from that time? Part 2, by the way, we'll come up to date and talk about what's happening now, but from that time.
With Sheffield United, a couple of things that stick out. Well, first of all, to say, when we went on the air, we should put it into context. The manager at Sheffield United at the time was Ken Furphy. Yeah. Across the city at Hillsborough, it was Steve Burtonshaw. Yeah. They were the two guys running the show. And I remember Ken Furphy, at the first press conference I went to, calling me to one side and said, "What have you done before, son? Where have you been before? Have you in front of all the press corps?" So I had to virtually give him my CV there and then to establish my credentials with him. But we fell out with Sheffield United, not with Wednesday so much. I don't know why they took different attitudes, because in those days commercial radio was new. BBC, of course, had its contracts for Sports Report and all the rest of it. We didn't have any contracts, but we wanted to cover the teams. Yeah. We weren't allowed then to do live commentary. You could do so many flashes per half, 30 seconds duration each, very, very tight. And Sheffield United decided after a season or so, or half a season, you're not going to do that for nothing. We want some money. Wednesday didn't take the same attitude for some reason, but United, maybe they were waiting to see what happened. United said, "We want some money on the table." And we said, "No, Why should we pay when the newspapers don't have to? We're doing nothing much more than they're doing.
Okay.
And they said, we demand the money. So we said, you're not going to do that.
We'll take this up in after the break in 5 minutes. We've got 10 seconds to the break.
All right, okay.
Yeah, we'll bring it up to date. We'll go back a little bit more. We've got more sort of photographic memories as well in part 2. Do rejoin us in 5. See you then.